Thank you, Mignon, Ryan, and Kathy, for beginning our service in such a warm manner. Good morning, and indeed the sun is shining. As we light our chalice, I share with you these words. We light this chalice flame in honor of hope, that it might symbolize for us a dawning time of renewed hopes. We have all gone through an ordeal, or should I say, a series of overlapping ordeals. We are emerging from those ordeals. We are entering, I believe, a time of hope. 1 in 3 Americans was either related to or knew someone who died of COVID. A quarantine made all of us feel more isolated, and for some that was a deadly experience. A significant number of people tried to end democracy in America. Political, social, and economic turmoil rocked our lives daily for months on end. But we are coming out of that storm. The sun is shining through the clouds. We can see clearly the emergence of a new day, a new dawn. Challenges lie ahead, but today we stand in a vastly different place than only 2 months ago. There are many reasons to feel and to embrace hope in this moment. In this context, I am hopeful and thankful that on this day, we begin a series of services about covenant, a concept that is so central to the flourishing of this or any congregation. I look forward to sharing and reflecting with you on that subject in just a few moments. May we return to Mignon.
Over the next 3 weeks, Reverend Ed is doing a series of sermons entitled The Covenants We Keep. You can think of a covenant as how we treat each other and work together to ensure good relations. We thought it would be appropriate to remind you of the covenant that our congregation adopted in 2016. For some of you, this may be the first time you've heard this. And over the next several months, we would like to get everyone's input and perhaps make some changes to this document. But for now, members of our congregation will read this covenant as it was adopted several years ago.
We, the members of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, make this covenant to ensure our good relations so that we can accomplish our mission, to foster spiritual growth, to care for each other, to protect and preserve the earth, and to work for peace and justice. We strive to be respectful, authentic, and support each other in making the following promises.
We will encourage each other as we search for truth and meaning.
We will welcome and celebrate diverse points of view and respect those with whom we disagree.
We will speak our point of view to each other honestly and directly, tempered with kindness and compassion.
We will be attentive and mindful in decision-making and do so in a democratic and collaborative manner.
We will acknowledge our humanness by assuming good intentions and seeking reconciliation when necessary.
We will focus on issues and solutions, not personalities, when disagreements arise.
We will speak out gently and with compassion when we witness disrespectful interactions.
Thus do we commit to realize our vision, to become a fully inclusive, compassionate faith community known for working boldly and deeply for justice.
Thank you, Kathy, for leading us in that exercise of having board members and others read the covenant. It is indeed a beautiful document, and I look forward to the exploration of revising it or amending it as the congregation sees fit. That will be an exciting process. And thank you, Pam, for your beautiful story. I found myself racing back in time to when in the second grade I changed elementary schools, and I did not know it at the time, but I was going through a list of the items that you articulated there, although it was all jumbled together in a bundle. And thank you for weaving that together with the work our denomination, religious movement has done in developing a nationwide covenant and pointing to the fact that that's a evolving document and will continue to be so as we enter the future. Early in my career in the 1990s, around 1995 or 1996, I was the minister of a UU congregation and very active in the community in which that congregation existed. I was appointed because of my very active engagement in the social action element and movement in that city. I was chosen with 3 others to be part of what was called the Peace Committee. The Peace Committee consisted of 4 people. They were all very high-profile people in the community, except me, and I was appointed essentially because one of the people that created this committee and found funding for it was an important member of the congregation I served. So I was not on that committee through personal merit, but through personal connection. The Peace Committee consisted of a white male conservative lawyer who was a very close friend and still is of Jeb Bush. So you can imagine a Democratic, a female, a person, Jewish by faith, Democratic state legislator, a psychotherapist who did work primarily on men, and me, minister of a liberal Protestant denomination. We did this work in a southern city that consisted of around 900,000 citizens. We went through a period of training in which a Presbyterian minister couple, a male and female in this case, both were ordained Presbyterian ministers, had trained extensively with Bishop Desmond Tutu in South Africa and had been deeply involved in the project called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. The Peace Committee was the brainchild of someone who wanted to find a way to de-escalate conflict in the city wherever it arose. We, the Peace Committee, were to work with groups that were having conflict and to bring about some degree of peace. Although the members of our group were very diverse, we got to know each other very well and to trust one another very deeply. On one occasion, after doing this work together for several months, we were called to help prevent conflict regarding the development and the implementation of a new sex education curriculum in the public school system. The people who had put together this curriculum were very mindful that the subjects they discussed could be inflammatory to some members of the community. And so they were very careful, very neutral in their language, very objective in their tone, not seeking to push anyone's panic buttons. But nonetheless, the introduction of this curriculum created a furor. In minor ways, the curriculum inevitably had mentioned topics such as birth control, abortion, gay and lesbian orientations, and other issues that were controversial to a segment of that group of 900,000 people. The school board reacted to the growing furor by creating a plan that would diffuse the conflict, and the peace committee was called upon to lead that process. Myself and 3 other people. Every important constituency and stakeholder group in that entire county that had any relationship to the school system was invited to participate. Representatives of every faith group were invited. Representatives of every parents group was invited. Additionally, there was an open invitation to anyone in the entire community who might be interested in helping out. The structure of these meetings was simple. A summary of a specific passage of the new curriculum would be read. The larger group, which was 300 people, would break into about 15 smaller groups. Each of those smaller groups had a facilitator. Many times the facilitator was a member of the Board of Education, and each group would talk about what they liked and disliked about the phrase, and then they would come back to the larger group and they would discuss the changes that were suggested, and they would compose a final version of what had been written, and then they would all vote on it, all 300 plus people. And a 60% majority would carry the weight of validating whatever form the verbiage was in. The way the school board was going to revise the curriculum was based directly on these summaries. As I worked on this project, I became aware of the unbelievable passions that were unleashed by this debate. Each of these meetings involved hundreds of people, and in each one there were at least a dozen or so people who were quite angry. For people on what is called the right or the conservative side, there was a profound concern that liberal forces were afoot, attempting to corrupt their children's morals by exposing them to education that would promote promiscuity, sexual license, and homosexuality. Those on what might be considered the left thought all of this laughable and thought that this other side on the right had an extreme fear of knowledge. The emotional reactivity on either side fed the other. The Peace Committee was right in the middle of it. As we waded into the storm, in meeting after meeting, here's what emerged for me. On each side, the liberal and the conservative side, there were 3 subgroups. The first subgroup, which consisted of perhaps 15 or 20% of each group, tended to have fixed positions, did not seem able to negotiate or compromise, tended to demonize the opposition, was very suspicious of anyone who spoke the language of compromise, tended to be very suspicious of those outside their group, and generated by far the most heat in every single discussion. We, the Peace Committee, called this subgroup the Inflexibles. A second and larger subgroup that made up at least 60% of the total group was far less rigid and inflexible in their thinking, but were highly persuadable. This group held positions, but tenuously. They could be mightily swayed by people who were around them. We called this group the Flexibles. And there was a third group, which was super important to our work as the Peace Committee. The third group was smaller than the first or the second group, and might only consist of 10 or 15% of the total. They held well thought out positions grounded in their thinking process and their traditions that were important to them. Their personal perspective influenced how they lived and how they thought. However, they understood that people have convictions different from their own that they may not share, and that was okay to them. They were eager to try to persuade others, but they never, ever were obsessed with the need to convert others. They had more quiet certainty than all the other groups, but they understood that people tended to come to different points of view, and that fact did not threaten them. They could be empathetic with people who were very different from them and their points of view, and that was okay with them. They looked upon it as learning. They understood the notion, the all-important concept of the common good that reflects not the best of the best, but the least objectionable to the greatest number. They understood the larger the group, the greater the need for flexibility. They did not see compromise as a threat to their integrity. The third group could easily be drowned out by others, but their role turned out to be essential to our work. We called the third group the principle-driven group. These experiences made an incredible impression on my young ministerial mind. Over decades of experience, I have seen the same phenomenon I just outlined replicated in every single group I've ever worked with. The Peace Committee soon realized we had been thrown into a chaotic and perhaps hopeless situation. We soon realized that we had been given this role because the school board and the school superintendent wanted someone to blame for the decisions that inevitably had to be made. And us four were the sacrificial lambs. We also realized that on the other side, in dealing with this group, we were stuck in interminable expressions of people's feelings and processing of people's feelings ad infinitum, and spinning around and around and around and never getting anywhere. Someone on the Peace Committee, with advice from a higher up somewhere, came up with a solution which we, using very, very neutral language, called the shared agreement to behavioral standards. It was in essence a covenant. Quite similar, in fact, to the covenant that was read a few moments ago by members of your congregation. The Peace Committee got together all the people in the principle-centered group. And we said to them, look, we need to pass as a group the approval of this behavioral agreement so that we can make progress forward. They immediately understood the significance of it. And part of the dynamic that I discovered is people in the inflexible group had almost ceased in their ability to hear others. So we on the Peace Committee were in the situation where there were only a subset of people of the entirety of the group that we could actually converse with and make progress with. And so we talked to the principle-centered group and we said, we need this. And so we had a mass meeting. And members of the third group got up and said, this is something we need to do, and here's why it's important. And the language of it was so high above the particulars of what the people actually discussed in their individual meetings that it was plausible. It was credible. Just like the covenant you read is far above the particulars of the day-to-day discussions you have in committees and on the board and in other places. So it passed by a solid majority. I wish to emphasize something. Each side, the liberal side, which I personally identified with totally, and the conservative side, which I did not identify with, had representatives of all three groups. Members of the third group, the principal group, found again and again that they had to talk to one another, even though they were ideologically different, they had to talk to one another to move things forward in the discussion that ensued. And ironically, they would begin to share with one another the difficulties they were having with people on their own side. And to a person, they saw their greatest difficulty not with people on the other side, but with the inflexibles within their own. The Peace Committee's facilitators seemed to function best when they were providing a good model of what it meant to live the principles. The less they talked, the better. The more they embodied principles, the better and more effective they were. This experience was a revelation to me. I identified, as I said, with the liberal side, but it became crystal clear to me that not being in covenant with one another, individual beliefs mattered little vis-a-vis what a group was actually able to accomplish. We can only go so far in life alone. We need one another. Conversely, an incredible power is available to each of us if we can find ways to work together. But working together does not happen miraculously. The only way we can work together in the long run is by being in a covenant with one another. I have experienced 8 congregations in great depth. I am crystal clear that the healthiest are those with the largest number within the circles of trust created by adherence to a common covenant. It does not matter how many brilliant, well-educated, generous skillfully articulate people there are, even committed people there are in a congregation, if there isn't a common basis of being able to work smoothly together, which nurtures trust among people, then nothing much really happens. We are individuals, for sure. And our individual beliefs and our inner spirituality matter greatly. Morality is generated from within the individual. However, at some point, we come face to face with the limits of our individuality. We are inescapably social beings. If we wish to work constructively with others, a covenant is a necessary path. That is why I'm so thankful that the Committee on Ministry and others are committed to a month-long examination of the fellowship's covenant and our relationship to it. I look forward to exploring this further with you during this month, and after the service, I look forward to a chat about it. May we return to Kathy at this time. As I extinguish the chalice flame, may the light of this flame go into each human heart present as hope, as light, as love. My words of benediction come from Joseph Cleveland, who wrote, "May we hear the melody of life and strain to be in harmony with it. May we feel in our bones the rhythms of life and find ourselves dancing with it." Amen.